He said he was visiting his brother, but our son found out the truth. Linda Barrett, wife of 29 years and mother of one, didn't let her hands shake as she read the message. Mark, the man I once built a life with from scratch, had been spending those weekends somewhere far from family. By morning, the gift he'd been hiding would be wrapped in legal filings, divorce papers, and a claim on everything we owned together. I'd been both partner and parent. Now I was the keeper of my own future. And when the documents landed in his hands, Mark finally learned what his surprise had cost him. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. When he handed me the necklace, I had no idea it was the last gift I'd ever accept from him. The kitchen was warm with the scent of rosemary chicken and garlic bread. Claire moved between the counter and the stove, a practiced rhythm she'd perfected over years of family dinners. Outside, the last sliver of winter sun bled into the horizon, washing the dining room in a soft amber glow. Robert leaned casually against the doorway, jacket still on, watching her with that smile, the one that could disarm her if she wasn't careful. I'm heading to my brother's place for a few days, he said, as though announcing he'd be picking up milk. Been feeling off. Need a little change of scenery. Claire stirred the sauce, forcing a light laugh. You? Feeling off? That's a first. She didn't ask why he couldn't just rest at home. They'd had enough tension lately. Picking at this thread might unravel the whole thing. When Noah came in, tall and restless at 17, he was already sniffing out the bread. Smells amazing, he said, dropping into a chair. Robert, in an almost theatrical gesture, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and slid it across the table toward Claire. For you, he said, his eyes searching hers. She hesitated, glancing from the box to him. Inside lay a delicate gold necklace, the pendant a tiny infinity symbol dotted with 3 tiny diamonds. It was the kind of thing she might have picked herself, simple, thoughtful, but something about it felt staged. Early anniversary gift, Robert added quickly, almost as though he'd rehearsed the line. Noah smirked. Dad, seriously? You're spoiling her. What did you do? Robert laughed too easily, his hand brushing over Noah's shoulder. Just being romantic. Not a crime yet. Claire smiled because she was supposed to, running her fingers over the cool metal. The truth was, her stomach had already tightened, as if her body recognized something her mind refused to name. They ate dinner, the conversation skipping between Noah's college plans and Robert's so-called quiet weekend away. Claire nodded where appropriate, but she kept catching Robert's eyes flickering toward her, like he was gauging her reaction to the gift. It wasn't tenderness she saw there, it was assessment. After the plates were cleared, she retreated to the sink, rinsing glasses that didn't need rinsing, her mind restless. The necklace sat heavy around her collarbone, colder than it should have been. Later, after Robert had gone upstairs to pack, Noah wandered into the living room. He was scrolling through his phone, but his brow was furrowed. Weird he didn't just go tomorrow morning, he said casually. Claire shrugged, unwilling to feed the unease building between them. Your dad likes an early start. By 9, Robert was gone, his suitcase clicking against the walkway, the taillights fading into the night. The house felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. Claire went to bed early, exhaustion heavy on her limb. In the half-dream state before sleep, she almost forgot the way Robert's hand had trembled slightly when he fastened the clasp of the necklace. Almost, it was just after midnight, when she woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Noah's shadow crossed her doorway, his voice low but urgent. Mom? She sat up, heart thudding. What's wrong? He held something out, Robert's phone, screen glowing in the dim light. He left this. Noah said. Claire blinked, confused. So, Noah swallowed, his thumb hesitating over the glass. It's not just texts from Uncle David. You need to see this. The light from the phone cut across her sheets, illuminating a series of messages, names she didn't recognize, words that didn't belong to the man she thought she knew. One thread sat open, the most recent message stark and final. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. We need to end this. Claire's breath caught, the necklace at her throat suddenly feeling like a shackle. The silence in our home was louder than any argument could have been. Robert left just after sunrise. He didn't knock on Noah's door or kiss Claire goodbye, just set his travel mug in the sink, grabbed his bag, and murmured a distracted, "See you in a few days." The sound of the front door shutting was sharper than usual, as though the house wanted her to know. Claire stood in the kitchen with her coffee, watching the steam twist upward before vanishing. Across the counter, Robert's phone still lay where Noah had placed it the night before. Silent now, but its secrets hadn't dissipated with the morning light. Noah shuffled in, hair mussed, still in sweatpants. He paused when he saw the phone. "You gone, tell him he forgot it?" Claire forced a small shrug. "He'll realize, maybe he'll call," but she didn't move to pick it up. Noah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying her. "You're not even curious?" Her spoon clinked against the mug. "Some things are better left. Mom, come on. I saw the messages. That wasn't Uncle David. And whoever it was, they weren't talking about work." The words lodged in her chest. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing coherent came out. "You shouldn't," she began, but he was already walking away, shaking his head like he'd expected her to dodge. The rest of the morning was a pantomime of normalcy. Claire loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the counters, checked the calendar. Outside, a cold wind rattled the bare branches against the siding, but every movement felt stiff, mechanical, as if she were playing a role in a play she didn't audition for. By early evening, the emptiness of the house pressed in on her. Robert had been gone less than 12 hours, and already the walls seemed too quiet. She stood at the window, watching a neighbor walk their dog, the leash swinging in an easy rhythm, and thought about how many times Robert had left for business, or to help his brother. How many of those trips were real? The phone was still there, a black rectangle of temptation. She picked it up, telling herself she just needed to check if he'd called. But the second the screen lit under her thumb, she saw the notifications, 3 unread messages from the same number as last night. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "I hate this waiting. Call me when you can. Please don't make me regret this." Claire opened the thread. The history scrolled endlessly. A cascade of intimate words, shared complaints, and arrangements that had nothing to do with family or business. She scrolled faster, almost dizzy, until one message stopped her cold. "This weekend can't be like last time. I don't want her finding out." Her breath caught, the phone slick in her hand. The floor creaked behind her. Noah stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of defiance and sadness. "So," Claire set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "So," she echoed, but her voice was thin, unfamiliar. He stepped closer. "Why does Dad always go away when something feels wrong? Every time you two fight, he's gone the next weekend." She wanted to tell him it wasn't like that he was imagining patterns that weren't there, but the lie lodged in her throat. "I don't know," she said finally, and it was the most honest thing she'd managed all day. They ate dinner in near silence, the clink of forks on plates, almost accusatory. Noah retreated to his room afterward, leaving her alone in the kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. When she finally picked up the phone again, it wasn't to call Rob. Her thumb hovered over the messages, drawn to the last one from last night, the one she hadn't been able to forget. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. We need to end this." Claire read it over and over, the words burrowing deeper with each pass. End what? Who was ending? And why did it feel like the necklace around her neck was burning through her skin? Her hand trembled as she set the phone down, staring at it as though it might offer answers if she looked long enough. But the only thing it gave her was the certainty that whatever Robert had been hiding, it wasn't going away on its own. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until she whispered into the empty room. "What else haven't you told me, Rob?" The truth was a hammer, and it hit me harder than I could ever have prepared for. Robert returned late Sunday evening. The kind of late where even the dog hesitated before going to the door. Claire had been in the living room, pretending to read a book she hadn't turned a page of in 20 minutes. When the door opened, he stepped inside like a man arriving somewhere foreign, looking around, gauging the temperature of the room. "Hey," he said softly, setting his bag by the stairs. Claire closed the book. "Hey." The single word came out brittle. He walked over to kiss her cheek, but she tilted her head just enough to make it awkward. He noticed she saw it in the flicker of his eyes, but he kept his tone casual. How was your weekend? You tell me, she said, her voice flat. His brow creased. What's that supposed to mean? Before she could answer, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. He didn't shuffle down like a teenager caught between moods. He came with a purpose. I know, Dad, he said, his voice steady but low. I saw what was on your phone. The air shifted, heavier. Robert froze mid-step, his mouth half open. What? I saw the messages, Noah said. Mom did too. So, you can stop pretending you went to see Uncle David. Robert's eyes darted to Claire. You went through my phone. You left it here, Claire said. And you left a lot more than that. She could hear her pulse in her ears. Who was she, Robert? His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. No, Noah cut in, sharper than she'd ever heard him. You're ridiculous. Just tell her the truth. For a moment, Claire thought he might try to brazen it out, turn the blame on them, but then something in his shoulders sagged, and he looked suddenly older. Fine, he said, rubbing his forehead. There was someone. It was a mistake. It's over. The word mistake hit Claire like a slap. A mistake you drove 3 hours for. That you lied about over and over. Robert stepped forward, hands raised in some mockery of surrender. I didn't want to hurt you. It wasn't serious. Claire laughed, the sound jagged. Not serious? You hid it from me for how long? He glanced at Noah, then away. A few months, he mumbled. I needed space. Things between us have been strained. That's your excuse? She said. That our marriage wasn't perfect, so you went looking for someone else. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. It started when I was traveling for work. I didn't plan it. Claire stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Then why the lies about your brother? Why pretend you were somewhere else? Robert's eyes slid away again, fixing on a spot over her shoulder. It was easier, he said, than telling you I needed time. Noah's laugh was bitter. Time? You needed Sarah. Robert flinched at the name, and Claire's stomach dropped. Sarah? She repeated. Noah looked at her. That's the name in the messages. Robert's hand went to the back of his neck, his eyes closing briefly like he wished the moment away. She's someone I met through work. She listened. She understood things you didn't. Claire's throat tightened until it hurt. Understood what, Robert? That you're a coward? He took a step toward her, palms out. Claire, I'm sorry. I ended it. It was just what? She demanded. A distraction? A hobby? A backup plan? His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The silence was worse than any admission. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. My brother doesn't even know I used his name. It was just an excuse to get away for a while. The truth landed between them like shattered glass, too sharp to touch, impossible to ignore. Claire stood there, the necklace cold against her skin, and thought, if this is the truth, what else has he been lying about? I thought I knew everything about him, but the truth about her shattered that illusion. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, too bright for the heaviness in Claire's chest. Robert was already at the table, coffee in hand, eyes on the newspaper like it could shield him. Claire moved past him without a word, poured her own coffee and stood at the counter. She could feel him watching her, but she didn't look back. We should talk, he said finally. She turned, leaning against the counter, mug cradled in her hands. Then start talking. He set the paper down, smoothing it unnecessarily. Her name's Sarah. I told you I met her through work. That's true. Claire's grip tightened. And the rest? Robert exhaled slowly. She's in marketing at a partner company. We met at a conference 2 years ago. She listened. Made me feel. Spare me the poetry, Claire snapped. What exactly did she make you feel that I couldn't? His jaw worked, but no words came. From the doorway, Noah's voice cut in. You don't have to answer that. We already know the answer. Robert's shoulders hunched. Noah, this is between your mother and— No, Noah said firmly, stepping into the room. You made it about the whole family when you lied to both of us. Robert pushed back his chair, the legs scraping the tile. I didn't want to drag you into something that's over. I ended it weeks ago. Claire set her mug down. Why should I believe you? You lied about where you were, who you were with. how long it had been going on. Because I'm telling you now, he said. She almost laughed, almost. You're telling me because you got caught. He rubbed his face. Look, Sarah, she's not what you think. It wasn't just physical. We talked about business, investments. Claire's head snapped up. Investments. Robert froze, realizing too late he'd said too much. What kind of investments? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Just side projects, he muttered. Noah crossed his arms. Like the one you told Mom you didn't have time for. Or the one that magically lined up with all your work trips. Robert glared at him. You don't know what you're talking about. Claire took a step closer. Then explain it to me. What was Sarah's role in these projects? He looked at the floor. She knew some people. Opportunities came up. It was the vagueness, the careful hedging, that told Claire more than any confession. So she was more than just your mistress. She was your business partner. Robert didn't answer, which was answer enough. Noah shook his head. Wow, you really covered all the bases, didn't you? Robert's voice sharpened. Enough, Noah. No, Claire said quietly. Let him speak. He's the only one here who isn't lying. Robert stood abruptly. I need some air. Claire didn't move. Go stay at your brother's, or Sarah's. I don't care which. He hesitated, as if considering whether to argue, then grabbed his keys and walked out, the slam of the front door vibrating through the floorboard. The house felt hollow in his absence. Claire sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her. The smell of his coffee still lingered, bitter in the air. Noah sat down beside her. You okay? She managed a small, humorless smile. Not even close. They sat in silence for a while. The only sound the hum of the refrigerator. Claire's mind spun, not just with images of Sarah, but with the quiet threads Robert had been weaving. Trips, investments, late-night calls. How many times had she taken his word without question? By late afternoon, she had an answer to at least one question. A friend from the industry called to check in, and in the course of their conversation, casually mentioned Sarah's position at a company Robert had been quietly funneling money into for over a year. Claire felt the ground shift under her feet. This wasn't just about betrayal in their marriage. This was about betrayal in every part of her life. Sarah wasn't just a woman Robert had fallen for. She was tied to a company he'd been secretly investing in, putting their finances and his loyalty somewhere she never suspected. When Robert returned that evening, Claire was waiting in the kitchen, her voice low and steady. What did she have that I didn't? This wasn't just about one affair, it was about everything he'd ever kept hidden from me. Robert's keys hit the counter with a dull clink, his shoulders sagging like he'd spent the day wrestling himself. Claire didn't look up from where she sat at the table, hands wrapped around a glass of water she hadn't touched. You've been investing in her company, she said. No greed and no preamble, just the fact dropped between them like a stone. Robert stiffened. Who told you that? Doesn't matter, she said. It's true, isn't it? He hesitated, then shrugged. It was business, Claire, that's all. Business. Her laugh was sharp. You lied to me about where you were going. You lied about who you were with. And now you want me to believe the money you siphoned out of our accounts was just business. His eyes narrowed. I didn't siphon anything. I moved funds. Short-term investment. Her voice stayed calm, but every word was a blade. Without telling me, without my consent, while I was budgeting grocery lists, you were wiring money to your mistress's company. Robert bristled. Don't call her that. Oh, I'm sorry, your business partner? Claire pushed back her chair and stood, every inch of her posture a dare. How long, Robert? How much money? He looked away. It's complicated. From the hallway, Noah's voice carried in. No, it's not. You lied. You cheated. And you took money from us. Robert turned toward him. Stay out of this, Noah. Too late, Noah said, stepping into the room. You already dragged me into it when you made Mom sit here wondering if she'd been stupid for trusting you. Robert rubbed his temples like the sound of their voices was an inconvenience. I was trying to build something for us for the family. Claire stared at him. You don't build a future by burning down the present. She didn't wait for a reply. Instead, she walked past him into the den, pulled open the file cabinet, and started sorting through their financial records. She knew Robert was behind her, bristling, but she ignored him. It didn't take long to find them. Transfers from joint accounts into a shell company she didn't recognize, then onward to Sarah's firm. Neat little trails masked just enough to fool someone who wasn't looking. She closed the folder and set it on the table. You've been hiding this for months, maybe longer. Robert crossed his arms. It's not hiding if you could have looked any time you wanted. That casual arrogance was the last push she needed. We're done pretending, she said. I'm finding out exactly what you've been doing, and I'm not taking your word for anything. The next morning, she called a private investigator. Her voice didn't even shake when she gave her name and explained what she needed. The man on the other end listened without judgment, then assured her he'd find the answers. While she waited, the atmosphere in the house turned to ice. Robert stayed out as much as possible. When he was home, he and Noah barely exchanged a glance. Dinner was a silent transaction. Plates filled, eaten, cleared. No conversation, no warmth. 3 days later, the investigator called back. Mrs. Walker, you should sit down. She listened as he detailed not just the affair, but Robert's pattern of hidden investments, false reporting, and quiet withdrawals. Sarah wasn't the first, and she wasn't the only person who'd benefited from Robert's side projects. Claire took notes, every word tightening the knot in her stomach. By the time she hung up, her pen had carved indents into the page. She walked into the living room where Noah was sprawled on the couch, earbuds in. He pulled one out when he saw her face. It's worse, isn't it? She nodded. It's not just her. It's everything. Noah sat up, jaw tightening. So what do we do? Claire looked at him, her voice low and certain. We find out just how deep this goes, and then we decide how to end it. The more I uncovered, the harder it became to look at him without disgust. Claire met the private investigator, Thomas Avery, at a quiet coffee shop 2 towns over. She chose the corner booth, her back to the wall because she wanted to see every expression on his face. He arrived with a slim black folder and the kind of measured step of a man who'd spent years delivering bad news. He didn't bother with small talk, just slid the folder across the table. Everything's in here, he said. I'll walk you through it. The first page was a spreadsheet, neat columns of dates, amounts, and recipients. Claire's eyes tracked the numbers, each line another cut. These here, Thomas said, tapping the sheet, are transfers from your joint account to a secondary account. Robert opened in his name only. From there, the funds went into multiple entities, some legitimate, some not so much. Claire's pulse thudded in her ears. Illegal? Let's say questionable, Thomas replied. Some are shell corporations registered offshore. A few are linked directly to Sarah's firm, and at least 2 are tied to investment groups flagged by federal investigators for fraud. She swallowed hard. And he's been doing this for how long? 18 months, consistently. Claire sat back, staring at the numbers as if she could will them into meaning something else, but they didn't lie. Thomas flipped to the next page. Photos. Robert and Sarah together at restaurants, hotels, business events that had nothing to do with his supposed travel schedule. One shot made her stomach twist. Robert, leaning in close to Sarah in a way that was unmistakably intimate, his hand on the small of her back. Her voice was quieter now. How long has the affair really been going on? Closer to 2 years, Thomas said gently. Longer than he told you. Likely started before the first business trip he mentioned to you last spring. Claire closed the folder, pressing her palm against the cover. Thank you. You want me to keep digging? He asked. Yes, she said without hesitation. If there's more, I need to know. When she got home, the house was silent. Robert's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. She needed space to process. Noah was in his room, but when she walked past, he opened the door. Did you find out? He asked. She met his eyes. It's worse than I thought. It's not just her. It's money, lies, and things that could ruin us if they came out the wrong way. Noah's jaw set. So what's next? Next, she said, I need him out of this house. When Robert came home that night, she was waiting in the kitchen. He started to speak, but she raised a hand. Save it. You're going to stay somewhere else for a while. His brow furrowed. Claire, I don't care where. Your brother. A hotel, Sarah. I don't care, but you're not sleeping here. He laughed, short and bitter. You can't just kick me out of my own house. Watch me, she said. He stared at her for a long moment, searching for the version of Claire who would back down, but she wasn't there anymore. Finally, he grabbed his keys and left without another word. That night, she sat alone in the quiet, the folder from Thomas open on the table. Every page was a piece of the life she thought she knew, stripped bare. The next morning, Thomas called again. One more thing, he said. Sarah isn't just connected to Robert through business. She's been listed as an emergency contact on one of his corporate accounts for over a year. Claire's stomach dropped. He gave her that kind of access? Looks that way. Claire hung up, staring at the phone in her hand, and thought, if she has that kind of access, what else has Robert already given away? If Robert thought I was going to sit back and take this, he was wrong. Sarah would hear me out. Claire chose the location carefully. A small, mid-range cafe downtown where Sarah wouldn't expect her. Not a high-end place Sarah could dress to impress. Not a dive where she could play the victim. Neutral ground. Sarah arrived 5 minutes late. Sunglasses perched on her head. Hair glossy in that effortless way that wasn't effortless at all. She spotted Claire immediately and hesitated, just long enough for a flicker of uncertainty to cross her face before she pasted on a smile and walked over. Claire, she said smoothly, sliding into the chair opposite. I wasn't sure if you'd actually call. Claire's tone was steady. You've been in my life for a while now, even if I didn't know it. I think I've earned a conversation. Sarah crossed her legs, leaning back as if she were the one granting the favor. If this is about Robert, this is about you, Claire cut in. And about what you've been doing with him. Sarah gave a little shrug. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Robert and we connect. It just happened. Claire leaned forward. Affairs don't just happen. They take planning. They take intention. You had dinners, trips. He's been investing in your company. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Annoyance, guilt. She smoothed it over with a smile. He believed in my work. And yes, we care about each other. But he told me he wasn't happy at home. Claire's jaw tightened. Of course he did. That's what men like him say when they want both lives. Did you ever stop to think about the family you were dismantling? I didn't want to hurt anyone, Sarah said, voice lowering like she was trying to soften the moment. Claire didn't blink. You didn't care who you hurt as long as you got what you wanted. For a moment, the mask slipped. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. You don't know what your marriage was like. Maybe I was giving him something he needed. Maybe you were taking what didn't belong to you. Claire countered. Sarah looked away, swirling the coffee she hadn't touched. It's not as simple as you think. Then make it simple for me, Claire said. How long have you been on his corporate accounts? How much money has he moved for you? Sarah froze. That told Claire more than any answer. I see, Claire said quietly. Look, Sarah said, straightening. I didn't ask for that access. He gave it to me. Said it was for convenience, business stuff. I never touched it without his permission. Claire's voice was calm but cold. Do you have any idea what kind of legal trouble you could be in? What you've both already stepped into? Sarah's hand twitched against her cup. If you're threatening me, I'm informing you. Claire interrupted. I'm done letting Robert write the story. If you think he's going to protect you when this comes out, you don't know him as well as you think you do. Sarah's gaze sharpened, like she was weighing whether to push back or retreat. Finally, she said, you don't know what you're dealing with. Robert's not the man you think he is. Claire stood, collecting her bag. Oh, I think I'm starting to. She left Sarah sitting there, half smile gone, eyes darting like she was trying to see the edges of the trap closing in. Outside, the cool air felt like a shock against Claire's skin. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she'd planted the seed of fear. Now she just needed the rest of the truth. Claire's phone buzzed as she walked to her car. Thomas's name on the screen, and a single text. You need to see this in person. I was no longer angry. I was making my life mine again. The morning after meeting Sarah, Claire woke with a strange clarity. The rage was still there, sharp and metallic, but it wasn't the only thing in her chest anymore. There was something else, something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Robert had taken so much from her: trust, security, the easy rhythm of a marriage she thought she understood. But she refused to let him take her future. She started small. The first step was finding a therapist. It felt odd, saying her own name aloud to the receptionist, booking a session as if she were admitting, "Yes, I've been broken." But the act of making that call, of saying "I need help," left her lighter. Her first session was she spoke about the lies, the double life, the way Robert's absence had hollowed out their home long before she knew why. The therapist listened without flinching, then said, "You've been living in survival mode. It's time to start living for yourself." Those words stayed with her. Noah noticed the change too. One afternoon, he found her at the dining room table with her laptop open, poring over a job listing. "You're applying for something?" he asked, a flicker of hope in his voice. "Something more than just a job," she said. "I used to have my own projects before your father. Before all of this, I put them aside. I'm not doing that anymore." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel forced. "I'm glad, Mom." They started doing little things together, walking the dog in the evenings, cooking simple dinners side by side. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. Meanwhile, Robert's presence shrank to the occasional tense phone call or email, usually about sorting things out or finding a way back. She didn't engage. Not anymore. She'd learned that every conversation was just another chance for him to twist the truth. One evening, an envelope arrived in the mail with Robert's handwriting. Inside was a short letter, an apology that felt like it had been written for the sake of appearances rather than any real remorse. Claire read it once, then folded it and slid it into the back of a drawer. She wasn't ready to forgive, and she doubted he was ready to deserve it. She focused instead on the tangible steps she could take to secure her own independence. She contacted a financial advisor, not the one Robert had insisted they use, but a new one recommended by a trusted friend. Together they began untangling the mess of accounts, assets, and liabilities. The more she understood, the more control she felt returning to her own hands. Still, the war wasn't over. Thomas had been digging deeper, and she knew that at some point, whatever he'd found would demand her attention. But for now, she let herself breathe. One afternoon, as she was closing her laptop after a call with her advisor, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Mrs. Walker, this is Elaine Carter, attorney for Garrison and Reed. We represent stakeholders in Walker Enterprises." Claire straightened. "Yeah, there's been a development you should be aware of," Elaine said. "It concerns the company your husband has been managing. I think it's important we speak as soon as possible." Claire's hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of development?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," Elaine replied. "It's significant." Claire hung up, staring out the window at the quiet street, the calm she'd been building already cracking. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to wait, and it wasn't going to be small. "He thought he could keep me in the dark, but I had the power now." Claire walked into Elaine Carter's office the next morning, the city still shaking off its rush-hour haze. The law firm was all glass and steel, a fortress built for quiet wars. Elaine stood as she entered, her handshake firm, eyes sharp. "Thank you for coming in so quickly," Elaine said, motioning for her to sit. "I think you'll want to hear this." Claire set her purse down, forcing her voice to stay even. "Your call made it sound urgent." "It is." Elaine opened a slim binder and rotated it toward her. "Walker Enterprises has been bleeding money for the past 6 months. Not because of the market, because of deliberate siphoning. Funds are being routed to an outside account. The account is in Robert's name." Claire didn't flinch. She'd been expecting something like this, though maybe not at this scale. "How much?" "Close to 7 figures," Elaine said. "Some of it is traceable to Sarah's company. Some isn't traceable at all." Claire leaned back. "And the board? They've been kept in the dark." Robert's position as acting CEO allowed him to bury the discrepancies. But here's the important part. Elaine slid another document forward. Your late husband's trust still names you as the majority shareholder. That means you have the authority to take control immediately. Claire stared at the paper. It was a key she hadn't realized she'd been holding. What happens if I do, she asked. You'll inherit the mess, Elaine said bluntly. But you'll also control the narrative. If Robert keeps going, the company could face legal action, bankruptcy or both. If you step in now, you can stabilize it and protect your own assets. Claire thought of Noah, of the home she'd fought to keep steady in the storm, and of Robert's smug belief that she'd never dare enter his world. Then I'll step in, she said. Today, the transition was swift. Elaine drafted the necessary notices, and by afternoon, Claire was standing in the company's executive conference room, looking out at a skyline she hadn't seen from this angle in years. The senior staff filed in, some curious, others wary. She introduced herself not as Robert's wife, but as Claire Walker, majority shareholder and your new CEO. A ripple went through the room. I know you've had a rough few months, she said, but we're going to rebuild, openly, honestly, and with the integrity this company was founded on. After the meeting, one of the older managers approached her quietly. We've been waiting for this, he said. Some of us didn't think Robert had the company's best interests at heart. You do. It was the first moment in weeks she felt the ground solid under her feet. That night, she sat in her home office, reviewing the ledgers, contracts and emails Elaine had sent over. It was worse than she thought. Not only had Robert been diverting money, he'd been negotiating to sell the company outright to a competitor. Without her knowledge, without the board's knowledge, her stomach turned. Selling would have stripped her of control entirely, leaving her with nothing but scraps of a legacy her husband had built, and she had helped preserve. She closed the file and stared at the framed photo on her desk. Her and John, taken years ago at a company fundraiser. His smile was warm, proud. She wondered what he'd say if he could see this now. Probably something like, "Don't let him win." The phone rang. It was Robert. She answered without greeting. "You've made your point," he said, "but you can't just walk in and take over. I've put years into running this company." "You've put years into running it into the ground," she interrupted, "and you were about to sell it without telling me." A pause. "Who told you that?" "The truth doesn't need a name, Robert. The truth stands on its own." Her voice was ice as she finished. "This company is mine. You'll get nothing." And for the first time she heard him lose his words. He thought he could destroy everything, but I wasn't going to let him win. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, a mix of order and tension. Claire walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, not a widow's black, not a victim's beige. Navy was control, steadiness, authority. Noah walked beside her, shoulders squared, a quiet show of solidarity. Robert was already inside, conferring with his lawyer. His suit was more expensive than hers, but it couldn't hide the strain in his face. He glanced at her, then quickly away, as if locking eyes might give something away. The judge called the case. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the company, about control, about years of trust broken. Elaine rose first, laying out the timeline with surgical precision. Robert's siphoning of funds, his hidden investments in Sarah's company, his attempt to sell to a competitor without board approval. Each piece landed with a quiet weight. Claire kept her gaze on the judge, not Robert, as if he were just another case file to be closed. Robert's attorney tried to paint him as a visionary businessman, one forced into creative solutions during a difficult market. It was a performance, and Claire could feel the cracks even before Elaine stood again. When it was Claire's turn to take the stand, the courtroom seemed to shrink around her. She spoke clearly, recounting the years she'd spent in the shadow of Robert's version of events. The trips to see his brother, the missing funds, the late-night calls she now knew weren't business at all. "I didn't come here to punish him," she said, her voice steady. "I came here to protect what's mine. This company isn't just numbers and contracts, it's people. It's my late husband's legacy. And I won't see it destroyed." Robert shifted in his seat, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. The cross-examination was brief. His lawyer tried to needle her about emotional motives, implying she was acting out of spite. Claire didn't bite. "If protecting my home, my son and my livelihood is spite," she said, "then yes, I'm guilty." By mid-afternoon, the case had moved from argument to evidence. Elaine played audio from a recorded board meeting, where Robert openly discussed selling to a competitor for personal liquidity. Gasps whispered through the room. When the closing statements came, Elaine's voice was low but firm. The law is clear, the ownership is clear, and Mr. Walker's resolve is clear. The judge didn't take long. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Mrs. Claire Walker retains full ownership and control of Walker Enterprises. Mr. Robert Walker is to be removed from any leadership or operational role effective immediately. The gavel struck. Robert's lawyer leaned in to speak to him, but Robert didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on Claire, something unreadable, part anger, part disbelief, flickering behind his eyes. She didn't return the look. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air felt sharper, cleaner. Reporters clustered nearby, but Claire didn't stop to give a statement. Noah touched her arm. "You did it, Mom." She allowed herself a small smile. "We did it." The ride home was quiet, but not heavy. More like the silence after a storm, when you're still listening for thunder that never comes. That evening she walked through the company's lobby, her lobby now, and looked up at the plaque bearing her husband's name. She placed her hand against the cool metal. "It's safe," she whispered, almost to herself. Across town, Robert sat in a dim bar, phone in hand, dialing a number he'd sworn he'd never call. Whoever was on the other end picked up and his voice dropped. "It's time we talk." The company was mine, but now it was finally mine in every way. The first morning after the verdict, Claire didn't rush to the office. She brewed her coffee slowly, watching the steam curl toward the kitchen light. It wasn't laziness, it was ownership. For the first time in years, she wasn't chasing Robert's mess. She was setting the pace. When she finally arrived at Walker Enterprises, the mood in the building was different. Not louder or busier, but steadier, like everyone had been holding their breath for too long, and now could exhale. Employees she barely knew by name smiled as she passed. Some with quiet nods, others with a simple "Morning, Mrs. Walker." Her first order of business was reorganization, not just titles and seating charts, but value. She called a full staff meeting in the glass-walled conference room, sunlight spilling across the table. "I know the last year has been difficult," she began, scanning the faces, veterans of the company, new hires, people who'd endured Robert's turbulence. "That ends now. We're going to run this company with transparency, fairness, and respect, for our clients, for our partners, and for each other." There was a murmur of agreement, a few relieved smiles. Claire could feel the weight lifting, piece by piece. She started with overlooked talent, people Robert had ignored in favor of his inner circle. She promoted a junior project manager with sharp instincts into a leadership role, reinstated a marketing team that Robert had dissolved, and reopened a training program for interns. Noah came on board part-time while finishing school, shadowing her in meetings and learning how decisions were made. It wasn't about grooming him to take over. It was about teaching him what ethical leadership looked like. "Mom," he said after his first week, "I get it now. This is more than a business for you. It's a promise," she said simply. Outside of work, she began carving out space for herself. She rejoined a community art class she'd left years ago, spent Sundays hiking trails she'd only driven past, and accepted an invitation to speak at a local businesswomen's luncheon. Robert's shadow still lingered in subtle ways, occasional rumors, an unreturned call from his lawyer, a brief sighting of him across a restaurant, but he was no longer part of her daily vocabulary. One late afternoon, as she was finalizing contracts in her office, the receptionist buzzed through. "Claire, there's a Mr. Thompson here to see you, says it's urgent." She frowned, not recognizing the name. A tall man in a tailored gray suit stepped in, carrying a leather briefcase. His handshake was quick, his tone direct. "I represent a consortium of European investors," he said. "We've been following your leadership since the court case. We think Walker Enterprises could be an ideal partner for an expansion project overseas." Claire studied him for a moment, gauging his sincerity. This wasn't a casual pitch. It was a door opening into something much larger than the walls of her building. "What kind of expansion?" she asked. "International distribution. A joint venture. You'd retain full brand control, but the reach." He smiled faintly. "Let's just say you'd be taking the Walker name global." She leaned back in her chair. Part of her wanted to ask for time, to run projections, to weigh Another part, one she hadn't trusted in years, was already leaning forward into possibility. She glanced at the folder he slid across the desk, its gold-embossed logo catching the light. "All right," she said, her voice calm but certain. What I built with my own hands is now the foundation for something even bigger." The following weeks were a blur of late-night calls, transatlantic Zoom meetings and careful due diligence. Claire wasn't about to sign on to anything without combing through every clause, every decimal point. The European investors, Polaris Global, were no strangers to big deals, but they quickly learned she was no stranger to protecting what was her. The proposal was elegant. Walker Enterprises would maintain full brand identity, while Polaris would provide infrastructure, networks and access to markets in 15 new countries. It wasn't just growth, it was reinvention. She sat with Noah one evening at the kitchen table, spreading the documents out like a map to a new continent. "This is huge," Noah said, scanning the pages. "You could take the company global." "Dad," he trailed off, then corrected himself. "Robert would hate that." "That's not why I'm doing it," Claire said. But yes, he would. Signing day arrived in a boardroom overlooking the Hudson. The skyline glittered, the river catching the sunlight like polished steel. Claire signed first, the pen moving with steady, deliberate stroke. The final click of the pen's cap felt like sealing a promise to herself, and to the people who had stood by her through the storm. The press release went out within the hour. Walker Enterprises partners with Polaris Global for international expansion. The news spread fast, and her inbox flooded with congratulations from industry peers and even a few competitors who admitted grudgingly that they admired her boldness. That night her phone buzzed with a number she recognized instantly, but hadn't seen in months. "Robert." Against her better judgment she answered. "I saw the news," he said. His voice was low, oddly measured. "You've done well." "Thank you," she replied, offering nothing more. There was a pause. "I need a loan." Claire almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "From me." "I'm in a bad place," he said quickly. "This isn't about us, it's about survival." She sat back in her chair, letting the silence stretch. "Robert, every decision you made was about you, and every decision I make now is about not becoming you. You're really going to let me drown?" "You've had a life raft in your hands for years," she said, her voice cool. "You chose to puncture it yourself." She ended the call. No anger, no rush of vindication, just closure. The weeks that followed were electric. Teams in Paris, Berlin, and Milan began coordinating with her New York office. Claire found herself on early morning calls with London, late-night negotiations with Singapore. She wasn't just running a company anymore, she was steering a global presence. One afternoon she stood on the balcony of her Manhattan office, the city humming below, when Noah joined her. "You're different," he said. "How so?" "Lighter, stronger. Like you're not just running from something, you're running toward something." Claire smiled faintly. "That's because I am." The partnership launched with a celebratory gala in Paris. Under the golden chandeliers of the Hôtel de Crillon, Claire gave a speech to an audience of investors, partners, and press. "Walker Enterprises was built on resilience," she said. "It's been tested, nearly broken, but never defeated. Today we're not just opening doors, we're building new ones." The applause was warm, sincere, and for the first time she let herself take in every bit of it without guilt. As she stepped down from the podium, a Polaris executive handed her an embossed envelope. Inside was an invitation, an exclusive summit for global leaders in Dubai. The note read, "They want you as the keynote speaker." I wasn't just leading a company, I was building a legacy. Dubai was a desert jewel, shimmering under a sky so blue it felt unreal. From her hotel suite's balcony, Claire could see the skyline stretching like a promise, glass towers rising from the sand, each one a testament to vision and nerve. It felt like the perfect place to speak about building something from nothing. The summit was a gathering of some of the most influential leaders in the world, CEOs, heads of state, innovators who had reshaped industries. Claire walked into the conference hall with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she belonged there. Not because of her title, but because of the work she'd done to earn it. Her keynote was scheduled for the second day. The night before, she sat at a desk in her suite, notes spread out before her. Noah curled up in an armchair with his laptop. "You nervous?" he asked without looking up. "Only in the way you should be before something important," she said. "Nerves mean you care." When she took the stage the next morning, the lights were hot, but her voice was steady. "I've been asked to speak about leadership," she began, scanning the crowd. "But leadership isn't about standing at the front of the room. It's about lifting the people in it. It's about integrity when no one is watching, and resilience when everyone is." She told the condensed version of her journey, not the gossip, not the scandal, but the truth, about building back from betrayal, about choosing transparency over expedience, about the power of saying no when it would be easier to say yes. By the time she finished, the room was silent for half a breath, and then the applause began, building, sustained, genuine. Cameras flashed, hands reached out as she stepped down. Over the next days, she met women from every corner of the globe. Entrepreneurs, ministers, grassroots organizers, each sharing how her story resonated with their own struggles. She began sketching plans for a new mentorship initiative, one that would connect these women to resources, networks, and each other. Back in New York, she wasted no time turning the idea into reality. The Walker Women's Initiative was launched within 6 months, pairing experienced leaders with women launching businesses in underserved markets. The program's first-year successes became case studies in business schools. Noah flourished in his role at Walker Enterprise. He wasn't just shadowing her anymore. He was making deals, managing projects, and earning respect on his own terms. Claire gave him room to grow, but she made sure he understood the weight of the values they'd built the company on. Meanwhile, Robert had faded almost entirely from the industry's view. Word trickled back that he'd attempted a few ventures, none of which lasted. Claire didn't follow the details. His life was no longer her business. Recognition came from unexpected places. Invitations to speak at Harvard, to consult for international NGOs, to join the board of a global ethics consortium. But the moment that caught her off guard was the call from the National Business Ethics Alliance. "Miss Ann Walker," the voice on the line said, "you've been nominated for our Leadership in Integrity Award. It's the highest honor we give." When the nomination went public, the headlines were unambiguous, from betrayal to boardroom triumph. Claire Walker's journey to the top. She didn't care for the dramatics, but she appreciated the message. Integrity wasn't just surviving. It was thriving without compromise. The award ceremony was set for spring, at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Claire stood backstage, the award heavy and cool in her hands, looking out at the sea of faces waiting for her acceptance. As the applause swelled, her phone buzzed in her clutch. One glance at the screen made her heart pause. It was a name she hadn't seen in years, tied to a chapter she thought was closed. What he thought was destruction became the foundation of everything I am. The message was short. "Congratulations. I'm proud of you. Can we talk?" It was signed, Robert. Claire stared at it from backstage, the Kennedy Center's applause still echoing. For a brief second, the noise of the room faded into a dull hum, and she was back at her kitchen table years ago, holding the necklace he'd given her, unaware it was the start of her unraveling. She didn't answer. Not yet. On stage, she accepted the Leadership in Integrity Award under the warm lights, her speech polished but heartfelt. "This award isn't just mine," she said. "It belongs to every person who chose to do what's right when it wasn't easy, and to everyone who's been told they couldn't, only to prove they could." The audience rose to their feet. Noah, seated near the front, stood tallest of all, pride written across his face. 2 days later, she met Robert in a quiet corner of a DC cafe. He looked older, not just in his face but in the way he held himself, slouched, as if years of failed schemes had bent him. "You've done well," he said, eyes flicking to the award in her back. "Better than I thought you would." Claire took a slow sip of her coffee. "Better than you wanted me to." He winced but didn't argue. "I came to say I'm sorry. For all of it. I don't expect you to forgive me." She studied him, searching for the man she used to know. I already did, she said. A long time ago. But that doesn't mean I need you in my life. Robert nodded, a kind of surrender in his expression. I hope you're happy, Claire. I am, she said simply. And she met. Back in New York, the offer from Polaris Global to buy out their shares landed on her desk. It was a massive deal, one that would give her sole control of the now international company she had rebuilt from the ashes. She didn't hesitate. Within weeks, Walker Enterprises was hers entirely, free from outside influence. The buyout made headlines, positioning her as one of the most powerful female CEOs in the country. She poured the profits into expanding the Walker Women's Initiative, opening new branches in South America and Africa. Her schedule was relentless. Meetings, travel, speaking engagements. But it wasn't the exhausting kind of busy she remembered from her marriage. This was purpose-driven. One evening, standing by her office window as the city lights blinked on, Noah stepped in. I've been thinking, he said. When the time comes, I'd like to take what you've built even further, maybe into sustainable development projects. Claire smiled, feeling something deep and steady in her chest. When the time comes, you'll be ready. She didn't need to control the future. She'd built the kind of foundation that could stand without her constant watch. The award she'd received sat on a shelf behind her desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder, destruction hadn't ended her. It had redefined her. As she left the office that night, a sealed envelope was waiting on her desk. The return address was from a law firm she didn't recognize. Inside, one line, "You've been named in a will." They never saw it coming, but I was always ready. The envelope sat unopened on her kitchen counter for 2 days. Claire wasn't avoiding it, at least that's what she told herself. But life had been moving at a relentless pace. Board meetings, Walker Women's Initiative milestones, calls with Noah about upcoming projects. On the third morning, coffee in hand, she slid a letter opener under the flap. You have been named as a primary beneficiary in the estate of Margaret Shaw. Claire's breath caught. Margaret Shaw had been her first mentor, a sharp, uncompromising woman who'd given her a job when she was fresh out of college and told her flat out, don't waste time proving you're good enough. Just be good enough. They'd lost touch over the years, but Claire never forgot her. The will left Claire a sum large enough to fund an entire new division of the Walker Women's Initiative. It felt poetic. Margaret had once invested in her potential, and now decades later she was passing that investment forward. Claire announced the new Shaw Fellowship at a press conference the following week. The fellowship would fully fund women-led startups in underrepresented industries. The room erupted in applause when she dedicated it to the women who refused to ask for permission to leave. Noah approached her afterward, pride in his eyes. You've turned every setback into a stepping stone, he said. It's kind of impossible not to admire. Good, she replied with a smile, because one day you'll be doing the same thing. Months passed, and Claire's company and her influence continued to expand. She was invited to speak at the World Business Forum in Tokyo, to consult for international nonprofits, to mentor CEOs in emerging markets. She accepted only what aligned with her values. Power for power's sake had no appeal anymore. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. One crisp autumn afternoon, she stood in the Walker Enterprises lobby, watching as a group of young entrepreneurs she'd mentored unveiled their first product line. Their nervous excitement reminded her of herself all those years ago, standing on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. She realized her legacy wasn't the buildings, the profits, or even the awards. It was the people, the ones who would carry forward the culture she'd fought so hard to create. Robert never reached out again. Word came quietly that he'd moved abroad, working in a small consultancy. She didn't think about him much anymore. Forgiveness had untied him from her story, and she intended to keep it that way. In her final memoir chapter, written late one night with the city lights streaming in through her apartment window, she typed the words, "This was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life." Her book became a bestseller, not because it was salacious, but because it was real. Readers connected with the story of a woman who refused to stay broken. Years later, Noah's children would walk into Walker Enterprises for the first time, wide-eyed as Claire introduced them to staff. "This is your family's work," she told them. "Not just mine, ours. And it's built to last." The building hummed with quiet energy. Deals were being made, ideas were taking shape, lives were changed. As Claire stood by the tall glass windows, watching the city pulse with possibility, she whispered to herself, "This is my legacy," and for the first time she knew it was unshakable.